Hi, Galsara. It's nice to electronically meet you. My name is Cassandra, and as your friend Zan probably told you, I used to work in animation, and from 2009 to 2014, I used to work at Pixar. So I spent 5 years in that animation studio as a graphic designer, a graphic artist, and I was part of a very small team doing that role. And I also learned quite a bit about animation and the industry and different technical aspects and aspects of the art and the story. Especially as part of the art department, I learned quite a lot about the process and the pipeline for creating art and designing the worlds for animated movies. So I'm happy to speak with you, and I'm really glad to receive your questions. And I wanted to just share with you something. When I was 6 years old, I decided that I desperately wanted to work in animation after I saw The Little Mermaid for the first time in theaters, because I was so blown away and inspired by that movie. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an oldie but a goodie. And I was really into drawing and into art. And my aunt actually bought me this really beautiful book, I believe it's called Animation, by Preston Blair. And it came out in the 90s, but this is a really incredible book. And Preston Blair was a very classic animator who worked at Walt Disney Studios on lots of beautiful movies. And so if you're interested in different aspects of art, of animation, I would highly recommend buying this book. I believe it's still available on Amazon, and it's just full of really beautiful images and techniques that can kind of get you started if you're interested in exploring that for yourself or your future. But when I was in 5th grade, which is, I understand, the same grade that you're in, a person who worked, I believe, in the art department of Pixar actually came to my 5th grade art class and did a presentation and a speech, and he just kind of talked about his job. And at the time, I was just totally blown away and so captivated and really excited by the fact that I got to meet someone who actually worked in this industry that I was so inspired by. And so that had a really big impact on me. And so I think I really love giving lectures or talking with students or talking with people who have dreams of working in animation, because I think that having that more direct contact, or actually feeling like you have more direct connection with someone who actually has lived the dream that you're envisioning for yourself, it makes it that much more real. And that's what it did for me, to actually meet someone who was working on a movie called A Bug's Life at the time, that really opened my heart and opened my mind to the possibility that this could be, an accomplishable goal for me to actually work in this industry. And then that did eventually become a reality many years later. So it's just interesting that you're also in 5th grade. And so let me get to your questions. Okay, how do they program? It says that you learned about the big box and wants to know if they still use it and what programs they're using. So I'm not sure if you're talking about inner software programs, or if you're talking about this. I know that there was kind of a documentary series called The Pixar Box, I believe, that sort of describes some of their processes and some of the work that they do. But there are many programs that are being utilized within Pixar to create the movie. Many of them are what's called proprietary, meaning that they are designed by Pixar employees themselves, and these programs are not available for common people to use. It's only for the Pixar employees and the Pixar family. And they have all kinds of custom tools and platforms, and so there's many, because there's many different departments and there's many people working on the film. And it's a very complicated process, even though when you're watching an animated movie, it may seem seamless or easy or fluid, the final result. But there are, in fact, many different processes and parts and pieces that go to creating that final illusion of life through the screen. And so if you're interested in other documentaries and things like that. There's tons of bonus feature content that's available from back in the Blu-ray days, I believe on YouTube. And then I think there's quite a bit available on Disney Plus. I know that they released a program called Inside Pixar on Disney Plus recently, and that shadows several different employees. I believe the first one is a friend of mine, Deanna Marseglese. She's French, so I always pronounce it wrong, but I'm very proud that that she got to be featured and be a part of that. And I haven't been able to see it myself because I don't have a Disney Plus subscription, but hopefully maybe I'll invest in it so I can watch it soon. What else? Is Pixar planning to do a different style of animation in the future? Not that I know of, but I do know that quite a few former Pixar employees have left the studio to explore some alternative types of animation. A friend of mine who used to work in the art department with me ended up going into stop motion animation and claymation. I also know some former Pixar employees who went into VR or virtual reality type animation studios. A couple of people who ended up working with Oculus for a period of time, if you've ever heard of them. And there is a lot of innovation happening in the industry, and there's also a lot of animation being created by smaller studios and smaller groups of people who are definitely playing with technology in new ways. And so I think it will be exciting to see what comes out in the future. And I think that the possibilities and opportunities for animation are increasing because Netflix is putting out original animation content, Amazon, all these streaming platforms. And so where it used to be just a couple of big name studios, I think that there's going to be quite a lot more coming through the pipeline. So it'll be interesting to see what people create, and who knows, they may be developing new technologies within Pixar. I'm not sure of that because my insights and information, well, that would probably be secret anyways, but it's been 6 years now since I worked at Pixar, so my information may be a bit out of date. Okay, what else? How do they do storyboarding? So storyboarding is one of the most challenging and taxing, I think, of all of the departments. I believe it requires a very broad range of skills from those who do it. So basically, they start with a script that was written by the director or sometimes some screenwriters. And so often it's usually just one or two people, maybe three max, that really work on writing down the entire narrative of the film on paper. And they do some descriptions of visuals, but it's usually very efficient and very bare bones and very not very elaborate. It's kind of to the point. And so that's kind of the skeleton of the film, is that narrative. So imagine basically taking a book that you love and translating it into a comic book. That's kind of similar to what the storyboard artists do, except they need to do it in more flushed out animated detail. And so story artists have to be amazing storytellers and writers. They have to be fantastic draftsmen and really good at designing both characters and sets and props. So they have to be incredible artists. And then on top of that, they actually need to be actors and actresses in a way, because when they go to a pitch meeting or their creative department meeting, their story, I think it's called a story review, which usually happens once a week with the director and producer and sort of the production designer and some of the main people of the film or main leads of the film. They all come into a room together. And it used to be pitched on boards, but I believe they're now more digitally but basically they will walk through these kind of comic book style outline drawings that are not colored or detailed, and they're not three-dimensional yet. They're two-dimensional. And then they need to act out the dialogue. And so you have to be really good at doing impersonations. You need to, as a story artist, whether you're a man or a woman, you'll be asked to act out the parts of people of the opposite gender than you, of someone who's much older than you, of someone that's much younger than you. And so it seems like a really fun job. Some of my dear friends did this job. And I didn't do it because it takes a ton of training, and I was hired for a different role. But I think out of a lot of the roles that are at Pixar that are in animation, the story artists have a very important function in the animation process, and they flush out a lot of details and they really bring things to life. And then once that's finished and their storyboard has been refined and has been accepted and has been finished, or greenlit as they call it, the rest of the team will use their comic book kind of animation to build out the rest of it, and then they'll start building everything else based on that. So it's really providing a very core structure of how the final film will look and how things will be played out. So hopefully that helps. And so they make a lot of decisions about the film. But yeah, it's a tough one. It takes a lot of training to get good at that one. Your next question is, are movies with actors more expensive than animated movies? So this really depends. Basically, animation can be, even 3D animation can be created at a smaller budget, or it can be created at a larger budget. And it really depends on the studio. It depends on how many people are employed. It depends on how fancy they get with their graphics. It depends on how much iteration they do with their development of the film before it's finished. So the short answer is that both live action, so the movies with actors, and animated films can be very, can be made on a smaller budget, or it can be made on a very large budget. I believe Pixar's budgets are pretty big. They're pretty up there, but you can see how that money is being utilized to create really, really beautiful, phenomenal films. And the average animated film takes, at Pixar anyways, takes usually between 4 and 6 years of time. And it takes around 700 to 1,100 people that actually work on that film. And not the entire stretch, but for at least usually 6 months to several years. So yeah, it really just depends on how elaborate the movie and how many changes they make and how efficient they are with their processes. So both can be expensive and both can be less expensive. You ask, how do they do character design? Is it a group of people, or is it one main person in charge of that? So there's a group of character designers that, they have their own that's their own title, their own group, but they're part of the art department. But every time there's a film, there's many character designers. I would say maybe around a dozen or so that work at different times on the film. But there's one main person called a production designer who's basically in charge of all the visuals of the film that has to approve all of those designs. And then there's also a lead character designer who kind of art directs all the other character designers. And character designers are first designed by hand, and so a lot of them use digital tools like Photoshop, and they use digital tools like these stylus pens that are basically a pen that draws right on a computer screen. And so they use very fancy tools and gadgets to draw the characters. But it's kind of a similar way to if you were drawing on a piece of paper, except you can change the designs infinitely and you can save many versions, whereas something on paper is a little bit more fixed, right? And oh yeah, so they're the character designers in the art department, and then after that there's what's called character modelers. And the character modeler's job is to take these drawings and specifications of the characters that the art department made and to build those in the 3D world. And so it's almost like they're kind of digital sculptors, and they use certain programs that help them bring those characters to life, kind of like a puppet in a way. And then the animation department takes it next. Well, actually rigging. So they need to take all those joints and fingers and pieces of the character and make them move. So there's a rigging department that does that. And then there's the animators that actually bring those characters to life, that do the performance and the acting. So it's lots of teams, lots of people, not super easy to do all by yourself. But some people do it. It just takes a while. Your other question was, why was computer animation not so popular when it first came out? Was it because it was too expensive, or because it took so long? So actually, Toy Story, which was the first ever computer animated film, was actually quite successful. I think it did really well in the box office. It may have won some awards. I'd have to research that. But I wouldn't say that 3D animation wasn't so successful at first or popular, but more that it was there was quite a lot of financial investment that needed to go into refining the techniques and making those techniques efficient, because like I was saying before, they are very complicated, and it's kind of there's a lot of math that goes in that. Like basically you're programming the computer to do a lot of different jobs and work for you, and that in itself adds a lot of extra layers than having done the old techniques. And Walt Disney also, when he was creating his 2D animation realm, spent many years developing different systems and techniques for doing that before it became really efficient and really financially viable or profitable for the studio. So there's always an upfront investment whenever someone's creating some kind of innovation or some kind of new technique that's never been done before, that has some complexity in it. And so that's just a part of the process of invention and human evolution. But luckily, Steve Jobs, who was one of the three founding fathers of Pixar, he very much believed in the potential of 3D animation and had quite a bit of funding from his successful enterprises on his own. You may know or be familiar with him. He was the creative chief of and kind of creator of Apple. So all these products came from him. And so, for I believe like the first decade, he did provide, and this kind of stuff can be found in his biography as well. I think, as well as some other sources online. But yeah, there was a lot of investment that had to go in before it became efficient enough to become very, very profitable. And then other animation studios started to develop and pop up. Yeah. Okay, I think I got everything. So I just want to encourage you to follow your dreams wherever they may take you, and they may change as time goes on, but to really hold this possibility or vision for yourself working in animation. Hold it dear and protect it, and allow it to exist within your heart and within your mind and within your imagination. because truly anything is possible. And I know that Pixar is a particularly difficult studio to land a job at because so many people want to work there and they do such amazing work. But never say never. And like I said, there's also lots of other opportunities available in the animation industry. I believe that industry is not going anywhere anytime soon because there's so much love from the public, from children, and from adults alone around animation. And there's so much that can be explored and so many different types of stories that can be told. Oh, there was one other question I think I missed was what are the major differences between 2D? Oh, how have computers changed animation? In lots of ways. Many ways. So animation used to actually be hand drawn and hand painted, and these individual cells. Yeah, it's just a very dramatically different process, 2D animation and 3D animation. But both of them are an illusion of life. And so one of them is a more fixed camera, kind of. It's just like one angle on this version of life. And 3D animation can actually be 360-degree angle, depending on the director and the set and how they decide to build out that set and how they decide to film it. So in 2D animation, there's less exploration and liberty and freedom around where the camera can be placed. So if you're picturing like an actual movie set, there's a director and there's a cameraman, maybe several cameramen, right? They have these rigs, and sometimes they may use drones nowadays, or they may use these cranes to get certain shots that they kind of zoom in like this or hover around, right? And the beauty of 3D animation is that there is no physical cameraman, there's no crane, and that you can put the camera anywhere you like. And so if you picture like you're creating like a little world, I forget what those are called. If you're creating like a little dollhouse, for instance, in a shoebox, and yeah, you have the capacity, almost like holding your iPhone with your camera, to kind of hover around anywhere you want, right? And so in live action, that's a little bit more challenging because we're not talking about a shoebox world, we're talking about a big full-size set, right? And so it can be quite expensive to move the camera in certain ways and position it in certain ways. But in the 3D animation world, it's kind of all computer created. It's all imagined within the box of the computer. And so you can imagine the camera to be anywhere you want. And so some directors really love to take advantage of that. And so they will fully flesh out the set from all angles and then allow themselves, they'll animate the characters and create the scene, but then they'll allow themselves to play with getting different shots from all sorts of different ways. And so it creates a very different visual dynamic or emotional dynamic. It can create more drama, more intensity. It can make it feel more magical. All these types of things that previously were more limited in the two-dimensional world, if that makes sense. It also makes it really easy to create merchandise and things like that because the character is already designed in the three-dimensional realm, and we already know exactly how it looks and how it moves, and so it's a lot easier to transfer that to a physical toy, right? Especially with Toy Story. Yeah, what other ways? Yeah, I just think more dimensionality. So if you think about drawing, you could draw something on a flat piece of paper, or you could draw something in a computer that has those perspective points that you can play with, right? And so it just gives more vivid quality and more dimensional quality and potentially more lifelike quality, even though 2D is also quite impressive what people can do. And I think nowadays there are more and more mixed mediums. And so what I am shooting this in today is actually I'm shooting myself in live action, but I'm using an effect called rotoscoping, which basically a computer illustrates and makes this scene look like I'm a comic book. And so there's techniques like that. There's all kinds of different apps that are being developed, and different ways of doing things. So it's getting more complicated in some ways, but also more interesting. And I basically look at animation as kind of a magic trick of sorts. And so it's creating this impression or the illusion of life that actually is not there in many ways, but it feels like these characters have a soul after all is said and done, like Woody and Buzz and Lightning McQueen. And and that's a really beautiful thing, to be able to tell stories in such a dramatic and interesting way, and to have so few limitations on where you can take that story. And so, the other thing is I just really want to encourage more girls and young girls and young women to have dreams and set their sights on working in animation, because still to this day it's around 80% of the industry is men and 20% women, and around only 10% of women are in leadership or director roles. And so we need more female stories, we need more women out there doing these creative things and helping with this innovation and helping to tell our stories as well as the stories of kind of more male oriented or sort of the things that boys get excited about. So I'm excited that you're excited about animation. Thank you for these questions, and I hope you have a wonderful day and that your project turns out successful. All right, thank you very much.